Welcome to the Introduction to the Constitution class by the Grumpy Old Vet. This is lesson 1 of 28, and it is the introductory class. We will be going over the syllabus, the 10 self-evident truths, and then finally a few definitions. This first class is important because in the next 5 classes, we will be going over 5 ancient documents that are all written in Old English. Thank you for your interest. Now let's move out. Welcome to the Introduction to the Constitution class, presented by the Hillsdale Justice Project at Liberty Hall. Narrated by John Rutan. Week 1, Introduction, Syllabus Overview, Self-Evident Truths, and Definitions. Week 2, the 1100 Charter of Liberty, in depth. Week 3, the Magna Carta of 1215, in depth. Week 4, the Petition of Right of 1628, in depth. Week 5, the Grand Remonstrance of 1641, in depth. Week 6, the British Bill of Rights of 1689, in depth. Week 7, American history leading up to what started as a civil war, and it turned into the Revolutionary War from 1750 to 1776. Week 8, Patrick Henry's speech, "Give me liberty or give me death," given at St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia, on March 23, 1775, Week 9. The Declaration of Independence, July 4, 1776, Week 10. The Crisis, written by Thomas Paine on December 23, 1776, and Week 11. Speech in the Convention on the subject of salaries, given by Benjamin Franklin, June 2, 1787. Week 12. Federalist Paper No. 1, General Introduction, written by Hamilton, and published on Saturday, October 27, 1787. Week 13. Federalist Paper No. 10, The Union as a Safeguard Against Domestic Faction and Insurrection, written by Madison, and published on Friday, November 23, 1787. Week 14. Federalist Paper No. 24, The Powers Necessary to the Common Defense, further considered, written by Hamilton, and published on Wednesday, December 19, 1787. Week 15. Federalist Paper No. 39, The Conformity of the Plan to Republican Principles, written by Madison, and published on Wednesday, January 16, 1788. Week 16. Federalist Paper No. 41, General View of the Powers, conferred by the Constitution, written by Madison, and published on Saturday, January 19, 1788. Week 17. Federalist Paper No. 45, The Alleged Danger from the Powers of the Union to the State Governments, written by Madison, and published on Saturday, January 26, 1788. Week 18. Federalist Paper No. 49, Method of Guarding Against the Encroachments of Any One Department of Government by Appealing to the People Through a Convention, written by Hamilton and/or Madison, and published on Tuesday, February 5, 1788. Week 19. Federalist Paper No. 51, The structure of the government must furnish the proper checks and balances between the different departments, written by Hamilton and/or Madison, and published on Friday, February 8, 1788. Week 20. Bounty Payments for Cod Fisheries Debate, given by Madison on the floor of Congress on February 6, 1792. Week 21. The Constitution, an Overview. Week 22. The Bill of Rights and later amendments. Week 23. The video series, The Constitution is the Solution, titled The Dangers of Democracy, produced by the John Birch Society. Week 24. The video series, The Constitution is the Solution, titled Enumerated versus Unlimited Powers, produced by the John Birch Society. Week 25. The video series, The Constitution is the Solution, titled Constitutional Economics and Money, produced by the John Birch Society. Week 26. The video series, The Constitution is the Solution, titled Constitutional War Powers and the Enemy Within, produced by the John Birch Society. Week 27. The video series, The Constitution is the Solution, titled Exposing the Enemies of Freedom, produced by the John Birch Society. And Week 28. The video series, The Constitution is the Solution, titled Restoring the Constitution Through Effective Action, produced by the John Birch Society. The 10 Self-Evident Truths. Number 1. All law comes from God. Let's look to ancient writings as evidence of this truth. 1. Isaiah 33:22. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king. It is he who will save us. This verse directly attributes the roles of lawgiver, judge, and ruler to God, implying that all legitimate laws originate from him. 2. Romans 13:1 and 2. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. This passage suggests that all governing authority, and by extension the laws derived from it, are ultimately established by God. 3. Psalm 19:7-8. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. This highlights the perfection and divine origin of God's laws, which serve as the foundation for righteousness and wisdom. 4. James 4:12. There is only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? This verse underscores the idea that God is the ultimate source of law and judgment. 5. Exodus 20:1 and 2. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. The 10 Commandments, which form the moral foundation for many legal systems, are presented as being directly given by God. 6. Matthew 5:17-18. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot, will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Jesus affirms the enduring authority of God's law. 7. Proverbs 8:15-16. By me kings reign, and rulers decree what is just. By me princes rule, and nobles, all who govern justly. Wisdom, personified as coming from God, is the source of just laws and governance. 8. Deuteronomy 4:8. And what great nation is there that has statutes and rules so righteous as all this law that I set before you today? This verse reflects the uniqueness and divine origin of the laws given by God to Israel. These verses collectively establish the biblical perspective that all legitimate laws and authority ultimately stem from God as the supreme lawgiver. Number 2. The basis of the law. This is the difference between natural law created by God and man's law created by government. Man is created by God and serves under the pleasure of God, and thereby is endowed by God with rights. Those rights are protected by the Constitution and common law. Corporations are created by government, and they serve under the pleasure of government, and thereby are endowed by government with privileges. Those privileges are protected by statutes and the Uniform Commercial Code. Number 3. The word Constitution is an ancient word that means contract. In the American context, the Constitution is a political agreement among sovereign entities, and is the type of contract better defined as a compact. In contract law, when there is a dispute, the law requires that the terms of the contract must be determined by the original meaning of the signers of the contract. The parties to the Constitution were the several sovereign states. The compact created 3 branches of a federal government. There are 2 parts of a contract: the parties to the contract and the product of the contract. With the Constitution, the parties were the several states as co-equal political subdivisions, and the product was the 3 branches with limited and enumerated specific powers that make the federal government. Nowhere in contract law can the product of the contract dictate the provisions of the contract. Only the parties to the contract can dictate the provisions. The states, through their people, are the authority of the compact, not the Supreme Court of the United States, which is but 1/3 of the product of the contract. Number 4. Freedom plus morality equals liberty. Our founders created a nation founded on liberty, not freedom. This is best demonstrated by Abraham Lincoln's famous Gettysburg Address, in which he said, "Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal." Our nation was a nation founded on liberty, not freedom. As we heard, this is echoed in President Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, given on November 19, 1863. Freedom, even though it sounds good, is dangerous, whereas liberty, which is freedom tempered by morality, brings us peace and prosperity. It promotes justice and a civil society. Number 5. Rights are coupled with responsibilities. Our rights are inherent in man by virtue of being created in the image of our Creator, and because of that, the laws of nature and nature's God are enforced through responsibility. An example would be that you have the right to the freedom of speech. If you falsely scream fire in a crowded room, you have the right to do that. However, if anyone's life, liberty, or property is damaged because of how you exercised your right, you must face the responsibility of the violation of the rights of others. First, let us understand where our rights come from, before we explore how we are held responsible for how we exercise those God-given rights. 1. Genesis 1:26 and 27. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Being created in God's image grants inherent dignity and rights to all human beings, rooted in divine authority, not man-made systems. 2. Psalm 139:13 and 14. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. This verse affirms that our value and identity are established by God even before birth, emphasizing that human rights originate from Him. 3. Acts 17:25 and 26. Nor is He served by human hands as though He needed anything, since He Himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And He made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. God is the giver of life and all things essential to humanity, including freedom and the right to exist, independent of human authority. 4. James 1:17. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. All blessings, rights, and freedoms are divine gifts, not products of human creation or legislation. 5. John 8:36. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. True freedom and liberty come from God through Christ, not from human governments or laws. 6. Galatians 5:1. For freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. God, through Christ, grants spiritual and moral freedom, reinforcing the idea that liberty comes from divine authority. 7. Job 1:21. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. This verse reflects the sovereignty of God as the ultimate giver of life, rights, and blessings, highlighting that humanity does not control these gifts. 8. Isaiah 45:9 through 12. Woe to him who strives with him who formed him, a pot among earthen pots. Does the clay say to him who forms it, "What are you making?" Or, "Your work has no handles"? I made the earth and created man on it. It was my hands that stretched out the heavens, and I commanded all their host. Humanity, as God's creation, derives its value and rights directly from Him, not from other men or human institutions. 9. Romans 2:14 and 15. For when Gentiles, who do not have the law, by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them. God has written His moral law on the hearts of humanity, implying that rights and justice are inherent and divinely ordained, not human inventions. 10. Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever He will. Even rulers are subject to God's authority, emphasizing that human governments cannot create or bestow fundamental rights. They come only from God. These verses collectively affirm that the rights of man, such as life, freedom, and dignity, are divine gifts endowed by the Creator, not products of human law or institutions. Now let us see what responsibilities come with the rights that are given. 1. Galatians 5:13. For you were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. While God grants freedom, individuals are responsible for using it in a way that serves others and honors God, rather than indulging in selfishness or sin. 2. Romans 14:12. So then, each of us will give an account of himself to God. Every person is accountable to God for how they use their rights and freedoms, whether they are used for good or for harm. 3. 1 Peter 2:16. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Freedom is a divine gift, but it must be exercised responsibly, in alignment with God's will, and not as an excuse for wrongdoing. 4. Matthew 12:36 and 37. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak, for by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Even in exercising the right to speak, individuals are held accountable for their words, showing that rights come with responsibilities. 5. Luke 12:48. But the one who did not know, and did what deserved a beating, will receive a light beating. Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required, and from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more. With great blessings, including rights and freedoms, comes the responsibility to exercise them wisely and righteously. 6. Micah 6:8. He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. This verse emphasizes that rights must be exercised with justice, mercy, and humility, as God requires moral responsibility in all actions. 7. Ecclesiastes 12:13 and 14. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, with every secret thing, whether good or evil. All human actions, including the exercise of rights, are subject to God's judgment, underscoring the need for responsible conduct. 8. James 1:22 through 25. But be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word, and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. But the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. Exercising God-given liberty requires aligning one's actions with His word and living out responsibility through obedience. 9. Deuteronomy 30:19 and 20. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life, that you and your offspring may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying his voice and holding fast to him, for he is your life and length of days. God gives humanity the right to choose, but he also holds people accountable for the consequences of their choices. 10. 1 Corinthians 10:23 and 24. All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. The responsible use of rights includes considering their impact on others, emphasizing the moral obligation to exercise them for the common good. 11. Matthew 25:14 through 30, the parable of the talents. In this parable, servants are entrusted with resources, talents, by their master. The master returns to hold them accountable for how they used what they were given. This illustrates that God-given gifts, including rights, must be used productively and responsibly, as individuals will be judged for their stewardship. These verses establish the biblical principle that the exercise of rights is not without accountability. God grants these rights, but he also requires individuals to use them in ways that are just, righteous, and aligned with his will. Number 6. No branch of government has authority over another branch of government. The founders created 3 separate but equal branches of government in the Constitution. Each branch has its own powers and responsibilities. The legislature has the 2 powers of the purse and impeachment. The executive has the power of the sword. The judiciary has no powers and is supposed to be neutral. In the different Federalist Papers, written by the framers of the Constitution, highlights this truth in the following Federalist Papers. Federalist number 47, James Madison. The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. Context. Madison explains the importance of separating powers among the 3 branches to prevent tyranny. No branch should exercise control over another. Federalist number 51, James Madison. In order to lay a due foundation for that separate and distinct exercise of the different powers of government, which to a certain extent is admitted on all hands to be essential to the preservation of liberty, it is evident that each department should have a will of its own. Context. Madison argues for the independence of each branch, ensuring they operate within their own distinct sphere of authority. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. The interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of the place. Context. This highlights how the separation of powers ensures that no single branch becomes dominant, as each checks the other. Federalist number 48, James Madison. It is equally evident that none of the branches ought to possess, directly or indirectly, an overruling influence over the others in the administration of their respective powers. Context. Madison stresses that the powers of the branches must be balanced to preserve their independence and prevent encroachment. Federalist number 78, Alexander Hamilton. The judiciary has no influence over either the sword or the purse, no direction either of the strength or of the wealth of the society, and can take no active resolution whatever. It may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment. Context. Hamilton explains that the judiciary is the weakest branch, tasked with adjudicating the laws, but lacking enforcement powers, sword, or financial control, purse. Federalist number 69, Alexander Hamilton. The President is to be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States, and of the militia of the several states, when called into the actual service of the Union. Context. This defines the executive's power of the sword, underscoring its distinct and separate function from the legislature and judiciary. Federalist number 70, Alexander Hamilton. Energy in the executive is a leading character in the definition of good government. It is essential to the protection of the community against foreign attacks. It is not less essential to the steady administration of the laws, to the protection of property, and to the security of liberty. Context. Hamilton highlights the executive's active and energetic role, distinct from the more deliberative functions of the legislature. Federalist number 58, James Madison. The House of Representatives cannot only refuse, but they alone can propose the supplies requisite for the support of government. They, in a word, hold the purse. Context. Madison emphasizes the House of Representatives' exclusive control of the purse, an essential check on the executive's power of the sword. Federalist number 79, Alexander Hamilton. Next to permanency in office, nothing can contribute more to the independence of the judges than a fixed provision for their support. Context. This reinforces the importance of judicial independence to maintain neutrality and separation from political pressures. Key points supported in these papers. 1. Separate but equal powers. Each branch is designed to be independent, with its own defined powers, to prevent tyranny. Federalist numbers 47, 48, and 51. 2. Distinct roles. The legislature controls the purse and has impeachment powers. Federalist number 58. The executive wields the power of the sword. Federalist numbers 69 and 70. The judiciary is neutral, adjudicating the law without enforcement power. Federalist number 78. 3. Checks and balances. The branches are structured to check each other without subordinating one to another. Federalist numbers 47 and 51. Number 7. The agents of government are bound by the Constitution, the people are not. The Constitution is a limit on the power and authority of government, and by limiting the government, the people have liberty. In Marbury versus Madison, 1803, John Marshall said, "A law repugnant to the Constitution is void, and all judges and every department are bound by that instrument." This principle is rooted in the founding documents, the Federalist Papers, and the writings of the founders. Here's an explanation with references. 1. Elected officials bound by the Constitution, Article 6, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, the senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. This explicitly states that all elected officials, as well as appointed officers, are legally and morally obligated to uphold the Constitution. Their power is not derived from their individual discretion, but is constrained by the supreme law of the land. Federalist number 57, James Madison. Madison emphasizes that elected officials are servants of the people and must adhere to the Constitution as a check on their power. The aim of every political constitution is, or ought to be, first to obtain for rulers men who possess most wisdom to discern and most virtue to pursue the common good of the society, and in the next place, to take the most effectual precautions for keeping them virtuous whilst they continue to hold their public trust. Federalist number 78, Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton asserts that the judiciary is empowered to enforce the Constitution as a binding standard on government officials. No legislative act, therefore, contrary to the Constitution, can be valid. To deny this would be to affirm that the deputy is greater than his principal, that the servant is above his master. 2. The people liberated by the Constitution. Preamble of the U.S. Constitution. The very purpose of the Constitution is expressed in the preamble, which seeks to secure the blessings of liberty for the people. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. This underscores that the Constitution is designed to empower and protect the people by securing their natural rights. Federalist number 84, Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton argues that the Constitution inherently liberates the people by limiting government authority. The Constitution is itself, in every rational sense, and to every useful purpose, a Bill of Rights. Declaration of Independence, 1776. The Declaration establishes that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed and are instituted to secure the unalienable rights of the people. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Thomas Jefferson's letter to Edward Livingston, 1824. Jefferson contrasted the binding nature of law on government officials with the liberties of the people. The true foundation of republican government is the equal right of every citizen in their person and property and in their management. Conclusion. The founders were clear that elected officials are bound by the Constitution through their oath of office and the structural limitations it imposes on governmental powers. Simultaneously, the people are liberated by the Constitution, which serves to protect their rights and limit government overreach. This dual relationship reflects the genius of the Founding Fathers in establishing a system that binds power while freeing the individual. Number 8. We are a compound republic. The French political philosopher Montesquieu wrote a series of writings called The Spirit of the Laws. He was the quintessential expert on republics, ancient and modern. He wrote that a republic could not exist on a large tract of land, such as the size of the colonies and later the states. In Federalist 51, Madison says that we are a compound republic. In example, Michigan is too big to be a republican form of government, so it is broken down into 83 smaller republics known as counties, and the counties are broken down into smaller republics known as townships. Madison's vision of a compound republic extends beyond the division between the federal and state governments. It includes additional layers of governance: counties, parishes, townships, cities, and villages, all functioning as smaller republics within the larger framework. This intricate structure directly aligns with Montesquieu's principles, ensuring that republican ideals can thrive even in a large nation. 1. The United States as a truly compound republic. A compound republic not only divides power between federal and state governments, but also within the states themselves. This creates a multi-layered system of governance designed to prevent tyranny and factional control at every level. Federalist number 39, James Madison. Madison describes the Constitution as establishing a government that is neither wholly national nor wholly federal. The states retain substantial sovereignty, and their internal structures, counties, parishes, and townships, further decentralize power. In this relation, then, the proposed government cannot be deemed a national one, since its jurisdiction extends to certain enumerated objects only, and leaves to the several states a residuary and inviolable sovereignty over all other objects. By breaking down governance into smaller republics at every level, the founders adhered to Montesquieu's principle that small republics are essential for preserving virtue and liberty. Federalist number 10, James Madison. Madison argues that the extended republic, composed of multiple layers of smaller republics, provides a safeguard against factionalism. Extend the sphere, and you take in a greater variety of parties and interests. You make it less probable that a majority of the whole will have a common motive to invade the rights of other citizens. This extended sphere includes not just the large geographic area of the nation, but also the subdivision of power into smaller republics, states, counties, townships, and cities. Each of these smaller units acts as a buffer, preventing a single faction from dominating the entire system. 2. Montesquieu's theory of small republics. Montesquieu emphasized the importance of small republics to maintain civic virtue and prevent corruption. He feared that large republics would lead to centralized power and oppression. Montesquieu, The Spirit of Laws, Book 8, Chapter 16. Montesquieu warns that a large republic without internal subdivisions is prone to corruption. In a large republic there are men of large fortunes, and consequently of less moderation. There are trusts too great to be placed in any single subject. He has interests of his own. He soon begins to think that he may be happy, great, and glorious by oppressing his fellow citizens. However, Montesquieu also suggested a solution, a confederation of small republics. The United States exemplifies this model, with its layered structure of government ensuring that power remains decentralized and responsive to local needs. 3. The role of electoral districts and subdivisions. The founders went further than Montesquieu by embedding the principle of small republics directly into electoral processes and governance structures. Counties and parishes. These subdivisions act as localized governments, ensuring that citizens have a direct connection to their representatives and governing bodies. This prevents the alienation and detachment often associated with large governments, townships, cities, and villages. These even smaller republics are responsible for addressing hyperlocal issues, maintaining the virtues of civic participation and community governance that Montesquieu valued. Congressional districts and the Electoral College, under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution, state legislatures are empowered to determine how their electoral votes are allocated. While most states use a winner-takes-all system, awarding all electors to the candidate with the majority of the statewide vote, states also have the option to allocate electors by congressional district. In this method, each congressional district acts as a small republic, choosing its own elector based on the district's popular vote, with additional electors representing the statewide outcome. This flexibility in electoral allocation reflects the decentralized nature of the American system and aligns with Montesquieu's principle of smaller republics within a larger framework, ensuring that no single faction can dominate the process. Federalist number 68, Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton highlights the importance of the Electoral College in preventing factional control. The immediate election should be made by men most capable of analyzing the qualities adapted to the station and acting under circumstances favorable to deliberation. By decentralizing the election process, the system mirrors the structure of smaller republics Montesquieu advocated. 4. Madison's rebuttal to Montesquieu's concerns. While Montesquieu feared that a large republic could not maintain liberty, Madison argued that the American model of a large compound republic solved this problem. Federalist number 10. Madison directly counters Montesquieu by asserting that the large geographic area of the United States, combined with its many internal republics, prevents factional dominance. The smaller the society, the fewer probably will be the distinct parties and interests composing it. The fewer the distinct parties and interests, the more frequently will a majority be found of the same party, and the smaller the compass within which they are placed, the more easily will they concert and execute their plans of oppression. Madison believed that the diversity of interests across a large republic, broken into smaller subdivisions, would make it nearly impossible for a single faction to dominate. This was a radical reinterpretation of Montesquieu's warnings, adapted to the unique American context. 5. Practical application, the layered republic in action. The multi-layered structure of the United States government ensures that power is dispersed and liberty is preserved. Local governments, townships, cities, and villages handle immediate concerns of citizens, fostering a sense of community and accountability. Counties and parishes serve as intermediary governments, balancing local needs with broader regional interests. States retain significant sovereignty acting as republics themselves within the larger national framework. Federal government, limited to enumerated powers, ensuring that it does not overshadow the smaller republics by landmass. Each layer acts as a check on the others, preventing the concentration of power that Montesquieu feared. Conclusion. The United States exemplifies Montesquieu's ideal of small republics within a larger confederation. The layered structure, from federal to state, to county to township, ensures that governance remains localized and responsive, while the extended sphere of the compound republic prevents factional dominance. Madison's vision of an extended republic with multiple internal republics proves that liberty and virtue can be preserved even in a vast nation if power is carefully divided and decentralized. This system is the genius of the founders, blending Montesquieu's principles with their own innovations to create a lasting safeguard against tyranny. Number 9. Federal government can't exist without states. States can't exist without counties. Counties can't exist without townships, cities, and villages. Townships, cities, and villages can't exist without the people. Thereby, the people have the greatest authority, and the federal government has the least authority. The layered structure of republican government, where each level is interdependent and derives its authority ultimately from the people, was a foundational principle expressed in various founding documents and writings, including the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, and other founding-era commentary. Let me outline the sources that illustrate this structure and the idea of government power emanating from we, the people. 1. The principle of government deriving authority from we, the people. Preamble of the Constitution. The Constitution begins by explicitly stating, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union." This emphasizes that all governmental authority flows from the people. The people are the source of sovereignty, and all levels of government, federal, state, county, township, act as delegates of that ultimate authority. Federalist number 39, James Madison. Madison reinforces this idea, arguing that the government is republican because it is derived from the authority of the people. It is evident that no other form would be reconcilable with the genius of the people of America, with the fundamental principles of the Revolution, or with that honorable determination which animates every votary of freedom to rest all our political experiments on the capacity of mankind for self-government. Madison makes clear that all levels of government must be based on the authority granted by the people. This foundation prevents tyranny and ensures that the system remains accountable to its ultimate source of power. 2. Interdependence of the federal and state governments. Federalist number 45, James Madison. Madison explains that the federal government depends on the states for its existence, as the states are responsible for electing federal representatives and executing federal laws. The state governments may be regarded as constituent and essential parts of the federal government, whilst the latter is nowise essential to the operation or organization of the former. Madison explicitly notes that the federal government cannot function without the states because 1. Senators were originally chosen by state legislatures. 2. The Electoral College is based on state representation. 3. The federal government relies on states to enforce and administer many of its laws. This reciprocal relationship illustrates that the federal system cannot stand alone without the states. 3. The role of counties and townships. While the Federalist Papers do not directly discuss counties or townships, the concept of decentralized governance is deeply rooted in the founders' vision. The subdivision of government into smaller units was essential to ensure that power remained localized and responsive to the people. Thomas Jefferson notes on the state of Virginia, 1781-1785. Jefferson emphasized the importance of local governments, especially townships, as the bedrock of republicanism. The way to have good and safe government is not to trust it all to one, but to divide it among the many, distributing to everyone exactly the functions he is competent to. Let the national government be entrusted with the defense of the nation and its foreign and federal relations, the state governments with the civil rights, laws, police, and administration of what concerns the state generally, the counties with the local concerns of the counties, and each ward township directs the interests within itself. Jefferson believed that townships, the smallest units of governance, were critical to ensuring self-governance. From the township level, authority flows downward to counties, then to states, and finally to the federal government, creating an interdependent hierarchy. John Adams, A Defense of the Constitutions of Government of the United States of America, 1787. Adams highlighted the importance of breaking down government into smaller, manageable units. The Republican form of government can only exist in a society of governors and governed, in which the governors are as much bound by the laws as the governed, and where every man feels his share in the management of public affairs. This reflects the interdependence of smaller Republican units, which ensure that all authority remains rooted in the people. 4. Montesquieu's influence on local governance. The founders drew heavily from Montesquieu's The Spirit of Laws, particularly his ideas on decentralization. Montesquieu, The Spirit of Laws, Book 2, Chapter 2. Montesquieu argued that liberty requires a division of power across smaller units of government. In a republic, the public good is more strongly perceived and better secured when each citizen has a role in government, either directly or through small local subdivisions. This idea of breaking government into smaller units directly influenced the American system of counties and townships as foundational components of state and federal governments. 5. The Electoral College and the role of local governance. The founders structured the Electoral College as an example of power flowing from the people through smaller republics and down to the federal government. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution. This clause entrusts state legislatures with determining how electors are chosen. Each state shall appoint, in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct, a number of electors. The Electoral College ties the federal government to the states, which themselves rely on local governance, counties and congressional districts, to determine outcomes. This structure reflects the interdependence of every level of government, ultimately grounded in the will of the people. 6. The Great Pool of Authority, We the People. The founders consistently emphasized that all government authority originates from the people. This concept is not just philosophical but practical, as it manifests in the structure of government. Federal government, limited by enumerated powers, deriving its authority from the states. State governments function as sovereign entities but rely on counties and townships for local administration. Counties and townships handle the day-to-day governance, ensuring that power is localized and that the people maintain direct involvement. Federalist number 14, James Madison. Madison ties it all together by emphasizing that the government is built on the foundation of the people. Happily for America, happily we trust for the whole human race, they pursued a new and more noble course. They accomplished a revolution which has no parallel in the annals of human society. They reared the fabrics of governments which have no model on the face of the globe. Conclusion: the structure of Republican government in the United States is designed to reflect an interdependence between its levels. The federal government cannot function without the states. The states rely on counties. Counties depend on townships, and all ultimately derive their authority from we the people. This layered system ensures decentralization of power and reflects both Montesquieu vision and the founders' commitment to Republican principles. Through writings like the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, and the works of Jefferson and Adams, this principle is consistently reinforced as the key to liberty and self-governance. Number 10, the people are the masters of the law and the final say over what is and is not constitutional, not the Supreme Court. This is simple contract law. The people that made up the several sovereign states were the parties to the contract. The contract produced 3 branches of the federal government. How can 1/3 of the product of a contract dictate the provisions of the contract? It can't. Only the parties to the contract can do that. The doctrine of meeting of the minds in contract law, coupled with founding-era writings, supports the principle that the people are the ultimate masters of the law and have the final say on what is or is not constitutional, not the Supreme Court or any single branch of government. Let's explore this in 2 parts. First, the legal doctrine, and second, founding documents and writings that address the sovereignty of the people. 1. Legal doctrine, meeting of the minds. In contract law, the principle of a meeting of the minds establishes that a valid agreement requires mutual understanding and consent between the parties involved. This concept is foundational to the rule of law and reflects the idea of collective consent in a republican government. Definition of meeting of the minds. The meeting of the minds refers to the mutual agreement between parties regarding the terms and obligations of a contract. It is a cornerstone of enforceable agreements and stems from the broader principle that agreements must be based on mutual consent, clarity, and understanding. Restatement of Contracts, 2nd edition, Section 17, Subsection 1. The formation of a contract requires a bargain in which there is a manifestation of mutual assent to the exchange and a consideration. This principle can be analogized to the constitutional system, where we the people are the primary parties to the contract, i.e. the Constitution. The people's understanding and consent to the structure of government are paramount. Marbury v. Madison, 1803. Chief Justice John Marshall acknowledged the centrality of consent and agreement to the rule of law. The powers of the legislature are defined and limited, and that those limits may not be mistaken or forgotten, the Constitution is written. Marshall's reasoning underscores that constitutional limits are not for the judiciary alone to interpret, but are grounded in the will of the people. 2. Founding principles. The people as masters of the law. A. Declaration of Independence. The Declaration establishes the principle that government derives its power from the consent of the governed. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. This passage asserts the people's ultimate authority over the government and its laws, including their interpretation of the Constitution. B. Federalist Papers, Federalist No. 49, James Madison. Madison explicitly recognizes that the people, not the branches of government, hold the ultimate authority. The people are the only legitimate fountain of power, and it is from them that the constitutional charter, under which the several branches of government hold their power, is derived. This reinforces the idea that any disputes over constitutional interpretation ultimately rest with the people. Federalist No. 78, Alexander Hamilton. While Hamilton discusses the judiciary's role in interpreting the Constitution, he acknowledges that judges themselves are subordinate to the people. The judiciary may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment, and must ultimately depend upon the aid of the executive arm, even for the efficacy of its judgments. This passage shows that judicial authority is not absolute and remains subject to the people's will. See Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson repeatedly affirmed the sovereignty of the people over their government and its laws. Letter to William Charles Jarvis, 1820. To consider the judges as the ultimate arbiters of all constitutional questions is a very dangerous doctrine indeed, and one which would place us under the despotism of an oligarchy. Our judges are as honest as other men, and not more so. They have, with others, the same passions for party, for power, and the privilege of their core. Jefferson warns against judicial supremacy and asserts that the people must retain the ultimate authority over constitutional matters. Kentucky Resolutions, 1798. Jefferson argued against federal overreach and for the people's authority to determine the constitutionality of laws. The government created by this compact was not made the exclusive or final judge of the extent of the powers delegated to itself, since that would have made its discretion, and not the Constitution, the measure of its powers. Here, Jefferson refers to the Constitution as a compact between the states, and by extension, the people, where each party retains the right to interpret and enforce its meaning. D. Abraham Lincoln. In his first inaugural address, 1861, Lincoln reaffirmed that the Constitution derives its authority from the people. The people of these United States are the rightful masters of both Congresses and courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert it. This statement emphasizes that the judiciary is subordinate to the people and that constitutional interpretation remains their ultimate responsibility. 3. Practical application of sovereignty. The structure of government, as outlined in the Constitution, reflects a compact theory rooted in mutual consent. The people, the source of all political power, as explicitly stated in the preamble. Townships and counties. Local governments derive their authority from the states, ensuring that power is decentralized. State governments, sovereign entities within the federal system, acting as intermediaries between the people and the national government. Federal government, a creation of the states and the people, limited by enumerated powers. The layered structure ensures that no single branch of government, including the judiciary, can claim final authority over constitutional interpretation without accountability to the people. Conclusion. The doctrine of meeting of the minds in contracts mirrors the foundational principle that all governmental authority is based on the consent of the governed. The Declaration of Independence, Federalist Papers, and writings of Jefferson and Lincoln affirm that we the people are the ultimate masters of the law and have the final say over constitutional matters, not the Supreme Court. This principle safeguards republicanism and prevents any branch of government from becoming tyrannical. Definitions. Domain, noun, historical. 1. Land attached to a manor and retained for the owner's own use. Because labor was cheap, there were ample advantages in cultivating the demesne, the lands of an estate. A levy of 1/10 on property in the royal demesne, a region or domain. She may one day queen it over that fair demesne. 2. Possession of real property in one's own right. Chattel, noun. Chattels, plural noun. 1. In general use, a personal possession, an item of property other than real estate. See also goods and chattels. Disseisin, noun. Law. 1. Wrongful removal of a person from real property that is lawfully possessed. Scutage, noun. 1. In a feudal society, money paid by a vassal to his lord in lieu of military service. Assail, verb, assailing, present participle. 1. Make a concerted or violent attack on the Scots army assailed Edward's army from the rear. Malignity. Definition. 1. Noun form of malign. Malign. Adjective. 1. Evil in nature or effect. Malevolent. She had a strong and malign influence. Pernicious. Adjective. 1. Having a harmful effect, especially in a gradual or subtle way. The pernicious influences of the mass media. Credulity. Noun. 1. A tendency to be too ready to believe that something is real or true. Moneylenders prey upon their credulity and inexperience. Consanguinity. Noun. 1. The fact of being descended from the same ancestor. The marriage was annulled on grounds of consanguinity. That is the conclusion to the first class. I hope that you were able to get good information from this class. This one is a long class, because it is the foundation for all the other subjects that we will cover in this series. With that, may God bless you, and may God always bless America. Fall out.